Bible in a Year Live Chronological Project, Week 36, Day 6, Good News Translation. Nehemiah dedicates the city wall. When the city wall of Jerusalem was dedicated, the Levites were brought in from wherever they were living so that they could join in celebrating the dedication with songs of thanksgiving and with the music of cymbals and harps. The Levite families of singers gathered from the area where they had settled around Jerusalem and from the towns around Netophah, and from Beth Gilgal, Geba, and Asmaveth. The priests and the Levites performed ritual purification for themselves, the people, the gates, and the city wall. I assembled the leaders of Judah on top of the wall and put them in charge of 2 large groups to march around the city, giving thanks to God. The first group went to the right on top of the wall toward the rubbish gate. Hoshaiah marched behind the singers, followed by half the leaders of Judah. The following priests blowing trumpets marched next: Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, and Jeremiah. Next came Zechariah, the son of Jonathan and grandson of Shemaiah. His ancestors also included Mattaniah, Micaiah, and Zachar of the clan of Asaph. He was followed by other members of his clan: Shemaiah, Azarel, Milalai, Gilalai, Ma'ai, Nethanel, Judah, and Hanani, all of whom carried musical instruments of the kind played by King David, the man of God. Ezra the scholar led this group in the procession. At the fountain gate, they went up the steps that led to David's city, past David's palace, and back to the wall at the water gate on the east side of the city. The other group of those who gave thanks went to the left along the top of the wall, and I followed with half of the people. We marched past the Tower of the Ovens to the broad wall, and from there we went past Ephraim Gate, Jeshanah Gate, the Fish Gate, the Tower of Hananel, and the Tower of the 100 to the Sheep Gate. We ended our march near the gate to the temple. So both the groups that were giving thanks to God reached the temple area in addition to the leaders who were with me. My group included the following priests blowing trumpets: Eliakim, Maaseiah, Miniamin, Micaiah, Elioenai, Zechariah, and Hananiah. And they were followed by Maaseiah, Shemaiah, Eleazar, Uzzi, Jehohanan, Melchijah, Elam, and Ezer. The singers, led by Jezariah, sang at the top of their voices. That day many sacrifices were offered, and the people were full of joy because God had made them very happy. The women and the children joined the celebration, and the noise they all made could be heard for miles, providing for worshiping the temple. At that time, men were put in charge of the storerooms where contributions for the temple were kept, including the tithes and the first grain and fruit that ripened each year. These men were responsible for collecting from the farms near the various cities the contributions for the priests and the Levites, which the law required. All the people of Judah were pleased with the priests and the Levites, because they had performed the ceremonies of purification and the other rituals that God had commanded. The temple musicians and the temple guards also performed their duties in accordance with the regulations made by King David and his son Solomon. From the time of King David and the musician Asaph long ago, the musicians have led songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. In the time of Zerubbabel, and also in the time of Nehemiah, all the people of Israel gave daily gifts for the support of the temple musicians and the temple guards. The people gave a sacred offering to the Levites, and the Levites gave the required portion to the priests. Separation from foreigners. When the law of Moses was being read aloud to the people, they came to the passage that said that no Ammonite or Moabite was ever to be permitted to join God's people. This was because the people of Ammon and Moab did not give food and water to the Israelites on their way out of Egypt. Instead, they paid money to Balaam to curse Israel, but our God turned the curse into a blessing. When the people of Israel heard this law read, they excluded all foreigners from the community. Nehemiah's reform. The priest Eliashib, who was in charge of the temple storerooms, had for a long time been on good terms with Tobiah. He allowed Tobiah to use a large room that was intended only for storing offerings of grain and incense, the equipment used in the temple, the offerings for the priests, and the tithes of grain, wine, and olive oil given to the Levites, to the temple musicians, and to the temple guards. While this was going on, I was not in Jerusalem, because in the 32nd year that Artaxerxes was a king of Babylon, I had gone back to report to him. After some time, I received his permission and returned to Jerusalem. There I was shocked to find that Eliashib had allowed Tobiah to use a room in the temple. I was furious and threw out all of Tobiah's belongings. I gave orders for the rooms to be ritually purified and for the temple equipment, grain offerings, and incense to be put back. I also learned that the temple musicians and other Levites had left Jerusalem and had gone back to their farms because the people had not been giving them enough to live on. I reprimanded the officials for letting the temple be neglected, and I brought the Levites and musicians back to the temple and put them to work again. Then all the people of Israel again started bringing to the temple storerooms their tithes of grain, wine, and olive oil. I put the following men in charge of the storerooms: Shelemiah, a priest; Zadok, a scholar of the law; and Pedaiah, a Levite. Hanan, the son of Zakur, and grandson of Mattaniah, was to be their assistant. I knew I could trust these men to be honest in distributing the supplies to the other workers. Remember, my God, all these things that I have done for your temple and its worship. At that time, I saw people in Judah pressing juice from grapes on the Sabbath. Others were loading grain, wine, grapes, figs, and other things on their donkeys and taking them into Jerusalem. I warned them not to sell anything on the Sabbath. Some people from the city of Tyre were living in Jerusalem, and they brought fish and all kinds of goods into the city to sell to our people on the Sabbath. I reprimanded the Jewish leaders and told them, "Look at the evil you are doing. You're making the Sabbath unholy. This is exactly why God punished your ancestors when he brought destruction on this city. And yet you insist on bringing more of God's anger down on Israel by profaning the Sabbath." So I gave orders for the city gates to be shut at the beginning of every Sabbath, as soon as evening began to fall, and not to be opened again until the Sabbath was over. I stationed some of my men at the gates to make sure that nothing was brought into the city on the Sabbath. Once or twice, merchants who sold all kinds of goods spent Friday night outside the city walls. I warned them, "It's no use waiting out there for morning to come. If you try this again, I'll use force on you." From then on, they did not come back on the Sabbath. I ordered the Levites to purify themselves and to go and guard at the gates to make sure that the Sabbath was kept holy. Remember me, O God, for this also, and spare me because of your great love. At that time, I also discovered that many of the Jewish men had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, or some other language, and did not know how to speak our language. I reprimanded the men, called down curses on them, beat them, and pulled out their hair. Then I made them take an oath in God's name that never again would they or their children intermarry with foreigners. I told them it was foreign women that made King Solomon sin. Here was a man who was greater than any of the kings of other nations. God loved him and made him king over all Israel, and yet he fell into this sin. Are we then to follow your example and disobey our God by marrying foreign women? Joadiah was the son of Eliashib, the high priest, but one of Joiada's sons married the daughter of Sanballat from the town of Beth-horon. So I made Joiada leave Jerusalem. Remember, God, how those people defiled both the office of priest and the covenant you made with the priest and the Levites. I purified the people from everything foreign. I prepared regulations for the priest and the Levites, so that all of them would know their duties. I arranged for the wood used for burning the offerings to be brought at the proper times, and for the people to bring their offerings of the first grain and the first fruits that ripened. Remember all this, O God, and give me credit for it. This is a message that the Lord gave Malachi to tell the people of Israel. The Lord's love for Israel. The Lord says to his people, I have always loved you. But they replied, How have you shown your love for us? The Lord answers, Esau and Jacob were brothers, but I have loved Jacob and his descendants, and have hated Esau and his descendants. I have devastated Esau's hill country, and abandoned the land to jackals. If Esau's descendants, the Edomites, say, Our towns have been destroyed, but we will rebuild them, then the Lord will reply, Let them rebuild. I will tear them down again. People will call them the evil country, and the nation with whom the Lord is angry forever. The people of Israel are going to see this with their own eyes, and they will say, The Lord is mighty even outside the land of Israel. The Lord reprimands the priest. The Lord Almighty says to the priests, Children honor their parents, and servants honor their masters. I am your father. Why don't you honor me? I am your master. Why don't you respect me? You despise me, and yet you ask, How have we despised you? This is how, by offering worthless food on my altar. Then you ask, How have we failed to respect you? I will tell you, by showing contempt for my altar. When you bring a blind or sick or lame animal to sacrifice to me, do you think there's nothing wrong with that? Try giving an animal like that to the governor. Would he be pleased with you or grant you any favors? Now, you priests, try asking God to be good to us. He will not answer your prayers, and it will be your fault. The Lord Almighty says, I wish one of you would close the temple doors as to prevent you from lighting useless fires on my altar. I am not pleased with you. I will not accept the offerings you bring me. People from one end of the world to the other honor me. Everywhere they burn incense to me and offer acceptable sacrifices. All of them honor me. But you dishonor me when you say that my altar is worthless, and when you offer on it food that you despise. You say, How tired we are of all this, and you turn up your noses at me. As your offering to me, you bring a stolen animal or one that is lame or sick. Do you think I will accept that from you? A curse on the cheater who sacrifices a worthless animal to me, when he has in his flock a good animal that he promised to give me. For I am a great king, and people of all nations fear me. The Lord Almighty says to the priests, This command is for you. You must honor me by what you do. If you will not listen to what I say, then I will bring a curse on you. I will put a curse on the things you receive for your support. In fact, I have already put a curse on them, because you do not take my command seriously. I will punish your children and rub your faces in the dung of the animals you sacrifice, and you will be taken out to the dung heap. Then you will know that I have given you this command, so that my covenant with the priests, the descendants of Levi, will not be broken. In my covenant I promised them life and well-being, and this is what I gave them, so that they might respect me. In those days they did respect me and fear me. They taught what was right, not what was wrong. They lived in harmony with me. They not only did what was right themselves, but they also helped any others to stop doing evil. It is the duty of the priests to teach the true knowledge of God. People should go to them to learn my will, because they are the messengers of the Lord Almighty. But now you priests have turned away from the right path. Your teaching has led many to do wrong. You have broken the covenant I made with you. So I, in turn, will make the people of Israel despise you, because you do not obey my will. And when you teach my people, you do not treat everyone alike.